So I thought I would clear the upstairs out. My kids were going to be coming soon. And I started moving some of Emmitt's stuff were still in boxes upstairs. I mean, it was clean, but some of his things were in boxes. And I remember rummaging through the boxes, of course, curious. And there was a lot of books on astrology because he was big into astrology. And I could see why, because like I said earlier, you could see that it was dark. I mean, it was like caveman days, sky, dark, no bleached out from city lights at all. You really could see the stars there. And somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true, I have no idea. But in front of that house, somebody told me from Whitehall that if you went up to the top of this, like really, it would have been a hard climb even for me. And I was pretty good at that stuff. They said that there was a meteor that hit there. Some people said that was embedded in the rock on top in front of this place. And I always intended to check it out, but it was kind of looked dangerous to get up there. And so I didn't. Not only that, in that area, there were timber rattlers. I've never seen them. But my understanding is they were on rocky ledges where they would bathe in the sun. But in my years living up there, I never encountered one. So there, he was big into the stars, and there was a lot of books of astrology, old cooking utensils, some clothes, odds and ends. I took these things, and this is critical to this story. I took these things out and put them in one of the barns just to clear the rooms out. That's when things actually started getting pretty loud there. A couple things, the hauntings, I reread what I wrote, and I said that they always seem to happen around 3 a.m. That things would go bang, and I would just say prayers. I would turn it over to God and the Holy Spirit and try to get back to sleep because I had to go to work in the morning. Staff Sergeant Shank then. And put on the Army uniform and drive in. I used to hear voices in there. And not just one person. I would hear a lot of people talking. Yeah. Like a lot of people talking in there. And one time in particular, and in one room in particular, this happened. And that was upstairs in one of the rooms. And I still remember that room. And it was empty. And I walked up in there on a summer day. And I was alone in the house. Right? I mean, there was nobody visiting me. I wasn't alone, obviously. And suddenly, I made a video about this called, I don't know what I called it. All the voices. All around me, it sounded like there was like 1,000 people talking. And I'm like, what the? I didn't have a cell phone. Maybe I would have recorded it. There weren't cell phones quite yet. They were almost ready to come into place, but at this time, no cell phones. It sounded like I was standing in a banquet hall with all kinds of people talking, like a giant banquet hall with 1,000 people in it. All around me, and you could hear some laughter, and the voices sounded kind of upbeat. They didn't sound threatening or depressed. It sounded like a banquet hall. But a lot of people all around me talking, and I didn't think ghosts at the time. I thought it was weird, but it was a summer day, and middle of the day. I thought maybe somebody pulled their car into my lawn and has their radio on, because I didn't have a TV set that would be on I couldn't figure it out. I figured it had to have been something outside that I was hearing, though there were really no houses around. There was a church across the street a little ways, but that was empty. They only had services once a month then. Here's a picture of that place. So I thought it must be somebody outside. So I went downstairs and I went outside. There was nobody outside. There were no cars, there was no traffic. So I heard what I just described in that room. And when I left the room, I didn't hear it. That was the end. It just was then when I was in it. Though I'd heard it before in that house, but never like that in that room. It was all around me, like 1,000 people. And it was strange. And it gives me kind of heebie-jeebies. So, go forward. My children show up. And Tommy, my boys, my daughter were there. They were just little kids then. And my kids and I, daughter Ann and Timmy, we were down in the kitchen. And Tommy was upstairs exploring the house. And didn't really think anything of it. It was the middle of the day. It wasn't nighttime. Summertime. Tommy comes downstairs. And we're in the kitchen. My daughter and my other son and me. And he's scratching his head. He's like, "That's weird." And I'm like, "What's weird?" He says, that's really weird." I go, "What's up?" I'm thinking, oh no. He says, "Well, I was upstairs." He says, "I went into one room and all of a sudden I heard a whole lot of people all around me. But there was nobody there." And he says, "I can't figure it out." But he heard the same thing. He said he heard a lot of people all around him, but there was nobody around. And I did something I don't like doing. I told a white lie, and I said, "Oh, you just heard us through the heat pipes, probably." I did not want my kids being afraid there. So I did something very rare for me. I told a white lie. I did not tell him that I experienced the same exact thing more than once, but specifically in that room upstairs. And it wasn't creepy. Like I said, in a way, it was creepy for sure, but in a way, no, because like I said, to me, they sounded like a banquet party, sounded kind of upbeat, like they were excited. Just a lot of people talking, like a murmur, clink of glasses, things like I was in a huge banquet hall. And so that's that story, which was odd. Now I'm going to get to the crux of this story. My kids left and I'm back alone there, which was always a difficult transition for me. And the summer came and went, and the fall came and went. And by the way, I used to go for long walks in that town. And I actually went for a walk towards, you can't call it a village. There was a one-store gas station about 2 miles up the road from my place. And I met one of the locals there, a woman about 40 at the time. And she talked my head off. And we were probably about a mile away from my house at the time. I met her on the road when she was walking. And she wanted to know if, of all things, if the place was haunted. She said everybody in town knows that house is haunted. That's what she told me. And I was kind of upset because I'm stuck living there alone. And I wasn't very happy about it, living alone in another haunted house. On top of the fact that I'd been stood up on my engagement. And she wanted a story. And I told her, no, it's not. I hate doing that, but I'm not. The town didn't. Back then, I didn't tell everybody everything like I am now. I kept it to myself. I was upset. My philosophy, my attitude then was, I was sick and tired of the hauntings. Because I figured, this is my time to live here, my time to live in the house. Their time came and went. Now it's my time. Who were they to disrupt my life? I was not very happy about it. I said, no, it's quiet there. I'm sorry, I'm not a big liar. But I just didn't want people knowing about it. And because she looked like she was really goading me for a story. And she told me then what happened to the people to explain what I saw when I first came there. She said it was a young couple. I already knew that. They were newlyweds and they had a baby. And they just got married and they moved into that place. And they had all kinds of hauntings happening there. And what happened one day, Sunday mid-morning, she told me, and she got the story, I don't know from whom, but she said they were sitting down to eat breakfast, adds up, and she said they needed some milk, so they got in their car and they drove up 2 miles up the road to the little, whatever, convenience gas station store, the only one they had in there for a long ways, to get some milk. When they got back home, all their clothes, a lot of their belongings were in one big pile in the middle of the floor. And I understand this had happened quite a bit to them. But she said that something else happened. Something, and all she would tell me, something really bad. They saw something really bad there. And I said, what? What did they see? And she wouldn't tell me, just like I wouldn't tell her. And she knew I was upset. But I said, I want to know, what did they see that made them leave? They saw something really bad where they had 2 cars. They got in their car and they just left. And by the way, 2 weeks after I moved in there, they came by apparently while I was at work and got their other car and all their stuff. I forgot to mention that. But they did come back at some point a couple weeks later and they got their stuff, including the car. They had 2 cars, and it was a nice car too that they left there. Yeah, they got in one of their cars and they just left, just like I found everything on the table. And she said it was something really bad, and she didn't want to tell me what it was because she thought it would upset me. So there's that little element. So the winter comes, and this is where this story is going to draw to a close. Comes to a climax, quite a climax. The hauntings were continuing, and I just left it in God's hands, and I just lived with it the best I could, like I always do. And I didn't drink much at all then. Honestly, on occasion I did. You'd think I'd drink. I didn't drink. I didn't take to drinking. I just leaned on my faith. And same stuff, it was just picking up. One night, everything comes to a head there. One night, and it was a snowy night. Proper snowstorm. I drove home, I had that Jeep with really nice tires on it for a good reason. I live in a small mountain town up in the Adirondacks, and the winters can be quite severe. So it was really coming down, and I remember this so well. I got home around 5 o'clock, which means the sun was just about setting at that point. I remember, I can't hear much now, I hear ringing. I got hearing loss from the Army and tinnitus. But I can still remember getting out of my Jeep that night, and the snow was coming, real big flakes, but straight down. There wasn't any wind. It was just coming down straight. But you could hear it like a soft crush. You ever hear the snow come down like that? You could, like a muffled crush of all those snowflakes. And it was really piling up. I mean, it was piling up. Really, the snow was piling up fast. Not a big deal. I went indoors, did whatever I do, played my guitar, probably whatever I did. My usual routine. Prayed, sang. There wasn't any internet, there wasn't any TV. And so it was really snowing hard, but there was no wind. It was just coming straight down. And I went to bed, and I slept on the first floor in a room next to the kitchen. Picture on again. Now you have to picture this place buried in snow. I mean, like 1.5 feet, 2 feet of snow. And you see the front porch that opens into the kitchen. Well, right to the right of that in this picture will be like a parlor, dining room, living room, and attached to that, which had a window opening to the back and a beautiful, gorgeous view. Gorgeous view. By the way, let me mention that view. rolling fields, green and gold, a huge old stone house that was a ruins, just the walls. It looked very, and then the blue lake Champlain, and then towering up the Green Mountains of Vermont. Gorgeous view from my back porch. But I slept downstairs in that room that my landlord told me the history. It was a dying room. He said, because that's back then when they didn't have hospitals. When people were dying, they gave them the most comfortable room in the house so that people could visit them without going all through your house. And if they lived, they lived. If they didn't, then they moved them into the parlor where they laid them out where people for a wake, for burial. I'm thinking, great. If you get any creepier, right? Picture off. Well, no, leave the picture on because you're going to need it at this point. So that night at 3 a.m., I hear somebody pounding on my front door. And you got to believe, like you see where the front porch is, and my bedroom wasn't really far away from that, just to the right and towards the back. And that wooden front, and my porch light was left on, which totally illuminated my porch and the front yard. And it was like real loud. Like somebody pounding on my door with their fist. 1, 2, 3, 4. I opened right up, my eyes opened up, and I'm like, oh shit. I know I heard that. I heard it again. Real loud, louder than that. I jumped up. I was scared. And because I didn't know who it would be at 3 in the morning. Nobody visited me. I didn't have people just show up. I didn't. And I had no family for well over 100. My nearest family was 200 miles away, more than that. Nobody ever visited me there. So twice, bang, 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 bang. Wakes me up and I'm laying there wide-eyed. And then again, I jump out of bed and looking at this picture, you see where the front door is. Well, if you can notice, the living room, it comes off a little bit like a bay window to where you can look out that window and you could see the front porch, right? I don't know if you can see that on here. So I crept out and I looked out the window because my front porch light was on and it really lit up the whole front. And I look out there wondering who I'm going to see. It stopped snowing, completely stopped snowing. And it was silent, zero wind, no snow, the stars were out. And there was about 2 feet of fresh, fallen, virgin, untouched snow. And I look out that window at my front door, and there's nobody there. And there's no footprints anywhere. Nowhere. And picture off. I'm kind of scared remembering this. So I'm like, probably said some expletives. And then followed by some prayers, which I just turned it over to God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ and rest my trust on that. And I went back to bed. And as soon as I laid down, as soon as my head touched the pillow, again, on my front porch, this time I jump out of bed and I grabbed a rifle that was loaded. I don't know why. Probably for this. And I crept around and I looked out that window again to see who's pounding on my front door. Like I said, there was zero wind. And there's nobody. There's nobody anywhere. And I'm like perplexed. Then I noticed something that I didn't see before. In the snow, in front of my front door, directly in front of my front door, there was an object laying in the snow. A square object, looked like a pillow. I'm thinking, what the heck is this? And there was no snow on it. So I went around into my kitchen, picture on again. I'm going to rely on that to give the imagery. So I went around in my kitchen. Again, the porch light was on, or I left it on, and because it really lit up the whole front. I opened the door, got the rifle in my arm, cradled in my arm. I got a flashlight. There's nobody anywhere. and there's no footprints at all, and the snow is virgin, untouched snow. In front of my door is a yellow, mildewy looking, a white pillow, but it looked really old and kind of mildewed and water stains on it. A white pillow with like old water stains, kind of yellowed, you know? And I was like, what the heck? And there was no snow on this. It had been placed in the snow, on top of the snow, in front of my door. I picked this up. And at this point, I'm kind of upset. I'm not scared, I'm upset. I'm like, what the hell is this? I shut the front door, you know, I'm not feeling threatened. Just annoyed, a little concerned. I look at it, and it was a white pillow, rectangular shaped, water stained, looked like it was old. Like something had been sitting out in a barn for a while. And I thought, it was only about that thick, the pillow. It wasn't like a pillow that you'd lay your head on. It was only about that thick. So it wasn't made for comfort. And I'm thinking this, because it was kind of an odd pillow. And it wasn't a throw pillow, because it was rectangular shaped. It wasn't a throw pillow either for your couch. And it wasn't a pillow made for comfort. And I thought, like, this is like a pillow for a coffin. That's what I thought. I'm like, great. I put it on the table. I got my flashlight and I got my rifle and I went outside. And because when you're living alone like this, if you want your peace of mind or any hope at all to get back to sleep, you've got to investigate. You don't hide. I didn't hide. So I went outside, trudging through the snow at 3:30 in the morning with a rifle and a flashlight. And there was absolutely no indication of any man nor beast had touched that snow since I got home. No footprints anywhere. There was about that much snow, fresh snow, falling. Just the same, I had to look around the whole property. And there was nobody in the barns. I even went around the house and down into the cellar, which the only way to get in the basement was from outside. And I went down there and looked around. There was nobody there. So there was nobody. But yet this odd-looking pillow was placed on top of the snow in front of my door. Like the story I just told you. I've been a long day. So I went back to bed, said my prayers, left it in God's hands. Got up, went to work, came home the next day, looked at that pillow again, thought the same thing. I can't figure out what this pillow would ever be used for other than a coffin. It's not made for comfort. Wasn't made for your bed or your couch. And I was sick of everything. I said, I'm going to throw this thing. Something had placed it there, you know, and woke me up pounding on the door to bring it into the house. I said, I'm going to throw this thing in a burn barrel. I had an old 55-gallon barrel in the backyard. I hate to say I burn trash occasionally. I'm going to put this in a burn barrel and burn it. And I was going to do that too. I was really upset. And voice of reason said, no, don't do that. And I listened to say, yeah, maybe I better not do that. Don't do that. And I thought, maybe I need to show a little respect here, you know? I said, the best thing I can do is to take this upstairs and put it back in the room, because I'd taken that pillow with the other stuff out of that room and put it in the barn where it was probably getting wet. And Emmitt, wanted it back in the house. That's pretty obvious. He wanted that back in the house. So it was back in the house. So I put it upstairs in the bedroom. And that's that. Occasionally, I still had hauntings going on. They slowed down a bit. I had another bad night after this, where logs were getting thrown up against the wall, and things like that, just still messing with me. Probably not happy about me being there. And this is where I did something I don't usually do. I felt I had nothing to lose, but I addressed the spirit. I spoke to it. And I stood in my kitchen after one night of very disruptive haunting stuff, that stuff you just can't write off as a house settling or wind or anything, you know. And I said, look, I said, you've got to stop scaring me. You're starting to scare me. I said this. I wrote all this down, so I know what I said. I wrote this down. I said, you've got to stop scaring me. I said, or I'm going to leave. And then some other people are going to move in here. And they may not take care of this place. Okay, I thought of something. This is the day after I made this video, before I posted it. I was thinking about this when I had that little audience with the spirit of Emmitt. I thought of something that I brought up that I didn't mention in the video. And that was, I said, you know, you had your life here, you know, and I respected that. And I said, now it's my turn. This is my life. You know, I told him I loved the house. It was a beautiful house. And I respected his life there and what he had. But now it was my turn to live there. And I didn't like being, you know, haunted, basically, interfered with, to the point where I was losing sleep. So I just remembered that I had that, also add that to the dialogue, the conversation, which I don't normally talk to spirits. I make it a rule not to, unless there are exceptions, and this was an exception. I was at my wit's end, and I knew who it was, and I knew darn well if I spoke, he would hear me. So that's all. Back to the video. You know, they may not fix the leaky roof like I did, or fix the plumbing. They may not like you. I said, you have every right to stay here if you want. And I knew it was Emmitt. I said, but you've got to stop scaring me. And I've kind of live and let live, you know. And I say, yeah, I did. I brought the Lord into it. And I said, if you don't stop scaring me, I said, I'll call on the Holy Spirit and I'll have you thrown out of here. And I meant it. And I believe that 100% too. I said, but I don't want to do that. And so that was it. And I'm going to tell you something. From that day on, nothing happened again there. There was peace. From that day on. And I lived there about another 6 months. Nothing happened. And when I moved out of there, because it was just too far from my work, and a huge old dairy farm house, it was just me there. And I wanted to just get an apartment closer to work. When I left, I said goodbye to him and the house properly. And I drove by that place years ago with Jen, actually. We went up there, good Lord, about 7 years ago. And some people were living there, and they fixed the house look nice. It looked like they put a little money into it, a family. So it quieted down. The story doesn't end here. No, doesn't end here. Not at all. About 2 years later, I'm in a bar in Whitehall, having a beer, imagine that. And I'm talking to this guy next to me, Loomis, I remember his name. And we used to tell stories, and I told him about this house. And the guy sitting on this side of me was talking to another guy. I knew the guy, Kurt, was sitting here. He's about my age, friend of mine. Kevin Loomis sitting here. I'm telling him about that house. And Kurt's grandfather was Emmitt. I knew this because I knew Kurt. I worked with him. He was a soldier in my unit, sergeant. And when I told him the part about the pillow that you just heard, he, sitting here, was talking to another guy. He was listening. He sat up bolt straight. He looked at me, and he looked like he turned a shade of white gray. He says, "Tell me what you just told him." And I thought he was offended because I knew it was his grandfather. I said, "Look, man, I'm sorry. I knew it was your grandfather." He says, No, that's all right. He said, "That's all right. Tell me what you just told him." I really thought I'd offended him. He said, "No, just tell me. It's all right. It's fine." And I told him what I just told you about the pillow. And he even turned a whiter shade of white and gray. He was part American Indian, part. And he says, "You're not going to believe this." He said, "When I was a child," he said, "my great-grandmother, his mother," which was Emmitt was his grandfather, they were very, very, very close in life. He said, and when she died, he remembered as a child going to the funeral at the graveside. And he said he remembered Emmitt leaning down, and he kissed his mother in the coffin on her forehead and said some words. And then he gently lifted her head up, and he took a white pillow from underneath her head. I'm not making this up. And then she was buried. But he kept that white pillow. Kurt said it was his most prized possession in life. Was that white pillow. He really kept it. It meant a lot to him. And I'd taken it and put it out in the barn, and apparently he wanted it back in. And, he was born in that house to that woman. Had a lot of family memories with her. And my understanding is they were really good people. Long gone now, but a good family. I did a Google search on him, and all I could find on him was that he was in the Army in 1940. That he was a private in the Army up and stationed at Fort Dix, New Jersey. So, good thing I didn't throw it in the burn barrel. Good thing I listened to that voice of reason that said, no, don't do that. I said, I'm going to burn this thing. Don't do it. Have a little respect. Better to put it back upstairs in that room and leave it there. Close the door and just leave that whole side of the house alone. And that's exactly what I did. I closed off that side of the house, by the way. I completely shut the doors and weatherized it. Just sealed it off. So that's the story, Memento Mori, which is a Latin word for remember your mortality, which meant in Victorian times people would take a memento mori, usually like a locket of hair off somebody before they buried them. Before they had photographs, they wanted something to remember their loved one before they were interred. But that's that story, and that stuff really happened like I just told you. So that's one of those times I got to remind myself, no, these things really do exist, and they're not all demonic, but it can be quite disruptive. So that's that story. I thought I would retell that. I've been wanting to retell that story. One candle light for this one, and a glass of beer instead of 4 or 5 candles and a cup of tea. And I got to get to bed soon because I got to go to work. But I might retell some of my stories. Why not? I mean, those things don't happen to me all the time back then, but they happen enough. For me, it's usually tied to the location, the house, but not always. So maybe I'll retell some other stories, some of my Christian stories as well. All right, take care. God bless you.